Welcome, dear listeners, to a story of courage, truth, and the quiet strength that can topple even the mightiest of empires. In the grand courtroom of the New York Arts Foundation, beneath crystal chandeliers and marble columns that have witnessed countless verdicts, a different kind of judgment is about to unfold. The air itself seems to hold its breath as celebrated architect Marianne Cole, a man whose name graces buildings across 3 continents, lets out a derisive laugh that echoes through the chamber. His target, his own wife, Marianne Cole, an unknown illustrator whose name has lived in the shadow of her husband's fame for 15 years, stands alone at the plaintiff's table. No attorney by her side. No legal team arranged behind her. Just one woman, her hands trembling ever so slightly, facing down the full force of her husband's wealth, reputation, and ruthless legal defense. The gallery whispers. Some shake their heads in pity. Others avert their eyes, unable to watch what they assume will be a swift and painful defeat. They see a desperate woman making a futile stand. They see the last gasp of a failing marriage. They see what Ethan wants them to see. A troubled wife, mentally unstable, clinging to delusions. But what none of them know, what even Ethan in all his arrogance cannot fathom, is what Marianne holds in her hands at this very moment. Evidence. Proof. The ugly, undeniable truth about an empire built on lies, manipulation, and crimes that have remained hidden for far too long. Today that empire begins to crack. And we, dear listeners, are here to witness every moment of its fall.
Every story deserves to be heard. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Your voice keeps the past alive.
The morning sun streams through the tall windows of the courtroom, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Marianne Cole stands at her table, her modest gray suit a stark contrast to the designer clothing worn by Ethan's legal team. She appears small, almost fragile in this imposing space. But appearances, as we shall discover, can be devastatingly deceiving. Ethan Cole sits at the defendant's table, leaning back in his chair with the casual confidence of a man who has never truly faced consequences. His attorneys, 4 of them from one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms, arrange their documents with practiced efficiency. To them, this is merely another day's work. Formality. The dissolution of a marriage where the outcome has already been decided by wealth and power. The judge enters, and the room rises. Judge Patricia Hoffman, a woman known for her sharp mind and no tolerance for theatrics, takes her seat and surveys the courtroom with keen eyes that miss nothing. "We are here today," she begins, her voice clear and authoritative, "for the preliminary hearing in the matter of Cole versus Cole, regarding the dissolution of marriage and division of assets. Mrs. Cole, I understand you are representing yourself today. Is that correct?" Marianne nods, her voice quiet but steady. "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well. You may proceed with your opening statement." Ethan's lead attorney, Marcus Blackwell, barely suppresses a smirk. "This will be over before lunch," his expression seems to say. But Marianne moves to the center of the courtroom, and something in her posture, a straightening of her spine, a lifting of her chin, signals that she is not here to beg or plead. "Your Honor," she begins, and though her voice is soft, it carries throughout the chamber. "What I am about to present today is not simply a matter of marital dissolution. This is not about irreconcilable differences or the sad ending of a love story." She reaches into her bag with trembling hands and produces a small USB drive. The gesture is simple, almost humble, yet the atmosphere in the room shifts palpably. "This case, Your Honor, involves systematic fraud, money laundering, and the concealment of criminal activity spanning more than a decade. My husband, Ethan Cole, has used the New York Arts Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to preserving and promoting art, as a front for criminal enterprise." The gallery erupts in whispers. Ethan's smirk vanishes. Marcus Blackwell is on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, these are wild accusations without foundation. Mrs. Cole has been under psychiatric care." "Mr. Blackwell," Judge Hoffman's voice cuts through the objection like a blade, "I will hear what Mrs. Cole has to say. You will have your opportunity to respond. Sit down." Marianne continues, her hands no longer shaking quite so much. On this drive, Your Honor, are financial records spanning 7 years. Bank statements from accounts held in the Cayman Islands under the name of Shell Foundations. Transfer receipts showing money meant for art acquisitions being diverted to private offshore accounts. Email correspondence between my husband and contractors showing deliberate inflation of project costs, with the difference being kicked back to my husband's private entities. She approaches the bench and hands the USB drive to the court clerk, who passes it to Judge Hoffman. The judge's expression remains neutral, but her eyes sharpen with interest. Additionally, Marianne continues, returning to her position, I have design files from architectural projects that were supposedly created by my husband's firm. These files contain metadata and revision histories that prove the actual designers were young architects working for minimal wages, while my husband took full credit and full compensation for their work. The courtroom is silent now. Even the whispers have stopped. Every eye is fixed on this quiet woman who is methodically dismantling the reputation of one of New York's most celebrated architects. Marcus Blackwell stands again, his voice tight with controlled anger. Your Honor, this is character assassination based on documents of questionable origin. Mrs. Cole has been diagnosed with paranoid delusions. Has she, Mr. Blackwell? Marianne's voice, though still soft, carries an edge now. Or have I been falsely diagnosed as part of a coordinated effort to discredit me? She produces a small digital recorder from her bag. Your Honor, I would like to present Audio Exhibit A. This is a conversation between my husband and Dr. Gerald Stevens, the psychiatrist who provided the diagnosis Mr. Blackwell is about to reference. With the judge's permission, Marianne presses play. The voice that fills the courtroom is unmistakably Ethan's, captured with crystal clarity. I need documentation that she's unstable, Gerald. I don't care what diagnosis you use. Depression, paranoia, whatever sounds clinical. I'll make it worth your while. The usual account. Another voice, presumably Dr. Stevens. Ethan, this is highly irregular. If anyone finds out, no one will find out. They never do. Just like the Riverside project. Just like the Mueller building audit. You get me the papers, and 50,000 is yours by Friday. The silence that follows is profound. Judge Hoffman's face has gone cold. Ethan Cole, for the first time, looks genuinely afraid. Marcus Blackwell has gone pale. Your Honor, Marianne continues, her voice stronger now, resonating with conviction. This is not a divorce case. This is the exposure of a criminal enterprise that has defrauded non-profit organizations, exploited young artists, and destroyed anyone who dared to stand in its way. I am not here seeking vengeance. I am here seeking justice. She meets Ethan's eyes across the courtroom. For 15 years she had looked away, had made herself small, had convinced herself that silence was survival. No more. My husband built an empire on lies, she says, her words measured and deliberate. He built it on the stolen work of others, on fraudulent financial schemes, and on the systematic silencing of anyone who questioned him. That empire, Your Honor, ends today. Judge Hoffman leans forward, her gaze fixed on Marianne with a mixture of surprise and growing respect. Mrs. Cole, are you prepared to substantiate all of these claims with documentary evidence? Yes, Your Honor. Every single one. And are you aware that if these allegations prove true, these proceedings will likely be suspended pending criminal investigation? Marianne nods. I am fully aware, Your Honor. And that is exactly what I am requesting. The judge turns her attention to Ethan's legal team. Mr. Blackwell, it appears we have a significantly different matter before us than initially presented. I am ordering a 2-week recess while I review these materials. In the meantime, Mr. Cole, you are not to leave the state of New York. Is that understood? Ethan manages a nod, his face now ashen. As the court adjourns, Marianne gathers her materials with steady hands. Around her, the gallery buzzes with shocked conversation. Reporters rush for the exits, already calling their editors. Ethan's attorneys huddle in urgent conversation. But Marianne stands alone, just as she began, feeling the weight of what she has started. There is no triumph in her heart, not yet. Only the grim determination to see this through to the end. For her mother. For every artist Ethan has exploited. And for herself. For the woman she had almost forgotten she could be. As she walks down the courthouse steps into the bright afternoon sun, Marianne whispers to herself, words meant only for her own ears and perhaps for the memory of her mother watching from somewhere beyond. It's begun. On a cold November evening 12 years ago, the Russell Gallery burned. The small but beloved art space, nestled on a prime piece of land in what would become one of Brooklyn's most desirable neighborhoods, was reduced to ash and twisted metal in a matter of hours. The official report called it an electrical fire. Faulty wiring in an old building. A tragedy, but no one to blame. Marianne's mother, Elizabeth Russell, lost everything that night. Her life's work, her dreams, and very nearly her will to live. She passed away from a heart attack just 6 months later, the stress and grief too much for her weakened heart to bear. Ethan had been sympathetic then. The perfect husband. He'd held Marianne as she cried, had handled the insurance paperwork, had even offered to help rebuild. But the insurance payout had been insufficient, the land taxes overwhelming for a widow and her grieving daughter. Eventually, through a series of financial maneuvers that Marianne hadn't fully understood at the time, the land had ended up in the hands of a development company. A development company, it turned out, that was secretly owned by Ethan Cole. Now, standing before Judge Hoffman once more, Marianne prepares to reveal what really happened that November night. Your Honor, she begins, her voice steady despite the emotion roiling beneath. I would like to present evidence regarding a fire that occurred on November 14th, 12 years ago. This fire destroyed the Russell Gallery, an art space owned and operated by my late mother, Elizabeth Russell. She displays a map on the courtroom's presentation screen, showing the location of the former gallery. This property is now the site of the Cole Luxury Residences, one of my husband's most profitable developments. The building generates approximately $8 million in annual revenue. Ethan shifts uncomfortably in his seat. Marcus Blackwell looks puzzled. This is clearly a line of attack he didn't anticipate. At the time of the fire, my mother had rejected multiple offers to sell the property. The land value had increased significantly due to neighborhood development, and several companies wanted to acquire it. My mother refused all offers. She had a vision for the gallery, plans to expand it into a community art center. That gallery was her life's work. Marianne's voice catches slightly, but she continues. The fire investigation concluded it was accidental. But I recently discovered evidence that tells a very different story. She approaches the bench with yet another USB drive. Your Honor, on this drive are files recovered from my husband's personal computer. I found them on a backup drive hidden in his home office. These files include email correspondence and financial records from the months preceding the fire. With the judge's permission, she displays the first email on the screen. It's from Ethan to someone named Vincent Caruso, dated 3 weeks before the fire. The Russell woman won't budge. We've tried reasonable offers, even generous ones. Time for a different approach. The property is too valuable to let sentiment stand in the way. Make it happen, but make it look natural. Usual fee, plus a 20% bonus for quick resolution. The courtroom erupts. Journalists frantically type notes. Gallery members gasp audibly. Judge Hoffman calls for order, her face grave. Marianne displays the next email. This one Vincent Caruso's response. Understood. The electrical system in that building is old. These things happen in old buildings. November 14th, after closing. Confirm the insurance situation. A third email from Ethan. Insurance is adequate but not generous. That's perfect. She'll have enough to walk away but not enough to rebuild. Once she's buried in debt, we make a final offer. 6 months, maybe less. The silence in the courtroom is deafening. Even Marcus Blackwell looks genuinely shocked. Either his client had lied to him about this too, or Blackwell is a better actor than anyone realized. Your Honor, Marianne continues, her voice thick with suppressed emotion, my mother didn't just lose her gallery that night. She lost her purpose, her legacy, everything she'd worked 30 years to build. The stress contributed directly to her death 6 months later. And all of it, was orchestrated by the man I was married to, for a piece of land he wanted. She pulls out more documents. These are financial records showing a payment of $150,000 from an offshore account controlled by my husband to Vincent Caruso, dated November 16, 2 days after the fire. Additional records show that 4 months after my mother's death, the land was acquired by Nexus Development Group for significantly below market value. Nexus Development Group is a shell company wholly owned by Ethan Cole. Judge Hoffman examines the documents carefully, her expression darkening with each page. Mrs. Cole, are you alleging that your husband commissioned an arson that resulted in the destruction of your mother's property? Yes, Your Honor. And I'm alleging that the stress and grief from that fire contributed to my mother's death. She died of a broken heart, Your Honor, a heart broken by deliberate criminal action. Ethan Cole is on his feet. This is insane. These documents are fabricated. I loved Elizabeth like she was my own mother. Mr. Cole. Judge Hoffman's voice is sharp. Sit down immediately, or I will have you removed from this courtroom. Marcus Blackwell pulls his client back down, whispering urgently in his ear. But Ethan's outburst has already done its damage, revealing the panic beneath his polished exterior. Your Honor, Marianne says quietly, there's one more piece of evidence. I've located Vincent Caruso. He's currently serving time in Rikers Island on unrelated arson charges. When investigators approached him with copies of these emails, he agreed to provide a statement in exchange for consideration in his current case. She submits a notarized statement to the court. In this statement, Mr. Caruso confirms that he was hired by Ethan Cole to start the fire at the Russell Gallery. He details how it was done, how he was paid, and how he was assured that the investigation would rule it accidental. He expresses remorse and states that he's willing to testify in any criminal proceedings. The courtroom descends into chaos. Reporters rush for exits to call in their stories. Gallery members shout questions. Judge Hoffman pounds her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. When silence is finally restored, the judge's face is set in grim lines. Mr. Blackwell, does your client wish to make any statement regarding these allegations? Marcus Blackwell looks like a man watching his career implode in real time. Your Honor, we would need time to review these materials and respond appropriately. These are extremely serious allegations. Yes, Mr. Blackwell, they are. They are allegations of arson, conspiracy, and, given the subsequent death of Mrs. Russell, potentially manslaughter. Judge Hoffman turns to her clerk. Contact the district attorney's office immediately. Inform them that evidence of a potential homicide has been presented in these proceedings. She turns back to Ethan, her voice cold. Mr. Cole, given the severity of these allegations and your demonstrated financial resources, I am revoking your bail conditions. You are to surrender yourself to court officers immediately. You will be held pending arraignment on potential criminal charges. You can't do this. Ethan shouts, all pretense of composure gone. I'm Ethan Cole. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I've built? Yes, Mr. Cole, Judge Hoffman responds, her voice cutting through his protests like ice. I know exactly what you've built, and I'm watching it burn down just like the Russell Gallery. Officers, please take Mr. Cole into custody. 2 court officers approach. Ethan struggles briefly, but they secure his arms and begin leading him from the courtroom. As he passes Marianne's table, he stops, jerking against the officer's grip. You'll regret this, he hisses at her. You think you've won. You think you can destroy everything I've built. I'll bury you. Marianne meets his eyes steadily, and when she speaks, her voice is soft but carries throughout the now silent courtroom. You already tried to bury me, Ethan. For 15 years. You tried to make me small, silent, invisible. You tried to bury my mother's memory along with her gallery. She pauses, and something fierce flashes in her eyes. But some things refuse to stay buried. Truth is one of them. Justice is another. The officers pull Ethan away, his shouting fading as he's removed from the courtroom. Marcus Blackwell and the rest of the defense team huddle in urgent conversation, their client now facing not just divorce and civil fraud charges, but potential murder charges. Marianne stands alone at her table, trembling slightly now that the moment has passed. In the gallery, she catches sight of several people she recognizes. Former students of her mother's, artists who had exhibited at the Russell Gallery, people who had loved Elizabeth Russell and mourned her loss. An elderly woman in the gallery stands and begins to clap. Slowly, others join her. It's not a celebration. The moment is too heavy with pain and loss for celebration, but rather an acknowledgement. A recognition that truth has been spoken, that a long-buried crime has been brought into the light. Marianne gathers her materials with shaking hands. Outside the courthouse windows, the sky is growing dark. She thinks of her mother's smile in that old photograph, the pride on her face as she stood before her gallery. "The land will be ours again, Mom," she whispers. "I promise you. It will be ours again." The third wall has fallen. But Marianne knows that the most dangerous battles often come when a cornered enemy has nothing left to lose. On a cold November evening 12 years ago, the Russell Gallery burned. The small but beloved art space, nestled on a prime piece of land in what would become one of Brooklyn's most desirable neighborhoods, was reduced to ash and twisted metal in a matter of hours. The official report called it an electrical fire. Faulty wiring in an old building. A tragedy, but no one to blame. Marianne's mother, Elizabeth Russell, lost everything that night. Her life's work, her dreams, and very nearly her will to live. She passed away from a heart attack just 6 months later, the stress and grief too much for her weakened heart to bear. Ethan had been sympathetic then. The perfect husband. He'd held Marianne as she cried, had handled the insurance paperwork, had even offered to help rebuild. But the insurance payout had been insufficient, the land taxes overwhelming for a widow and her grieving daughter. Eventually, through a series of financial maneuvers that Marianne hadn't fully understood at the time, the land had ended up in the hands of a development company. A development company, it turned out, that was secretly owned by Marianne Cole. Now, standing before Judge Hoffman once more, Marianne prepares to reveal what really happened that November night. "Your Honor," she begins, her voice steady despite the emotion roiling beneath, "I would like to present evidence regarding a fire that occurred on November 14th, 12 years ago. This fire destroyed the Russell Gallery, an art space owned and operated by my late mother, Elizabeth Russell." She displays a map on the courtroom's presentation screen, showing the location of the former gallery. "This property is now the site of the Cole Luxury Residences, one of my husband's most profitable developments. The building generates approximately $8 million in annual revenue." Ethan shifts uncomfortably in his seat. Marcus Blackwell looks puzzled. This is clearly a line of attack he didn't anticipate. "At the time of the fire, my mother had rejected multiple offers to sell the property. The land value had increased significantly due to neighborhood development, and several companies wanted to acquire it. My mother refused all offers. She had a vision for the gallery, plans to expand it into a community art center. That gallery was her life's work." Marianne's voice catches slightly, but she continues. "The fire investigation concluded it was accidental. But I recently discovered evidence that tells a very different story." She approaches the bench with yet another USB drive. "Your Honor, on this drive are files recovered from my husband's personal computer. I found them on a backup drive hidden in his home office. These files include email correspondence and financial records from the months preceding the fire." With the judge's permission, she displays the first email on the screen. It's from Ethan to someone named Vincent Caruso, dated 3 weeks before the fire. "The Russell woman won't budge. We've tried reasonable offers, even generous ones. Time for a different approach. The property is too valuable to let sentiment stand in the way." Make it happen, but make it look natural. Usual fee, plus a 20% bonus for quick resolution. The courtroom erupts. Journalists frantically type notes. Gallery members gasp audibly. Judge Hoffman calls for order, her face grave. Marianne displays the next email. This one Vincent Caruso's response. Understood. The electrical system in that building is old. These things happen in old buildings. November 14th, after closing. Confirm the insurance situation. A third email from Ethan. Insurance is adequate but not generous. That's perfect. She'll have enough to walk away but not enough to rebuild. Once she's buried in debt, we make a final offer. 6 months, maybe less. The silence in the courtroom is deafening. Even Marcus Blackwell looks genuinely shocked. Either his client had lied to him about this too, or Blackwell is a better actor than anyone realized. Your Honor, Marianne continues, her voice thick with suppressed emotion. My mother didn't just lose her gallery that night. She lost her purpose, her legacy, everything she'd worked 30 years to build. The stress contributed directly to her death 6 months later. And all of it, was orchestrated by the man I was married to, for a piece of land he wanted. She pulls out more documents. These are financial records showing a payment of $150,000 from an offshore account controlled by my husband to Vincent Caruso, dated November 16, 2 days after the fire. Additional records show that 4 months after my mother's death, the land was acquired by Nexus Development Group for significantly below market value. Nexus Development Group is a shell company wholly owned by Ethan Cole. Judge Hoffman examines the documents carefully, her expression darkening with each page. Mrs. Cole, are you alleging that your husband commissioned an arson that resulted in the destruction of your mother's property? Yes, Your Honor. And I'm alleging that the stress and grief from that fire contributed to my mother's death. She died of a broken heart, Your Honor. A heart broken by deliberate criminal action. Ethan Cole is on his feet. This is insane. These documents are fabricated. I loved Elizabeth like she was my own mother. Mr. Cole. Judge Hoffman's voice is sharp. Sit down immediately, or I will have you removed from this courtroom. Marcus Blackwell pulls his client back down, whispering urgently in his ear. But Ethan's outburst has already done its damage, revealing the panic beneath his polished exterior. Your Honor, Marianne says quietly, there's one more piece of evidence. I've located Vincent Caruso. He's currently serving time in Rikers Island on unrelated arson charges. When investigators approached him with copies of these emails, he agreed to provide a statement in exchange for consideration in his current case. She submits a notarized statement to the court. In this statement, Mr. Caruso confirms that he was hired by Ethan Cole to start the fire at the Russell Gallery. He details how it was done, how he was paid, and how he was assured that the investigation would rule it accidental. He expresses remorse and states that he's willing to testify in any criminal proceedings. The courtroom descends into chaos. Reporters rush for exits to call in their stories. Gallery members shout questions. Judge Hoffman pounds her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. When silence is finally restored, the judge's face is set in grim lines. Mr. Blackwell, does your client wish to make any statement regarding these allegations? Marcus Blackwell looks like a man watching his career implode in real time. Your Honor, we would need time to review these materials and respond appropriately. These are extremely serious allegations. Yes, Mr. Blackwell, they are. They are allegations of arson, conspiracy, and, given the subsequent death of Mrs. Russell, potentially manslaughter. Judge Hoffman turns to her clerk. Contact the district attorney's office immediately. Inform them that evidence of a potential homicide has been presented in these proceedings. She turns back to Ethan, her voice cold. Mr. Cole, given the severity of these allegations and your demonstrated financial resources, I am revoking your bail conditions. You are to surrender yourself to court officers immediately. You will be held pending arraignment on potential criminal charges. You can't do this. Ethan shouts, all pretense of composure gone. "I'm Ethan Cole. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I've built?" "Yes, Mr. Cole," Judge Hoffman responds, her voice cutting through his protests like ice. "I know exactly what you've built. And I'm watching it burn down just like the Russell Gallery. Officers, please take Mr. Cole into custody." Two court officers approach. Ethan struggles briefly, but they secure his arms and begin leading him from the courtroom. As he passes Marianne's table, he stops, jerking against the officer's grip. "You'll regret this," he hisses at her. "You think you've won. You think you can destroy everything I've built. I'll bury you." Marianne meets his eyes steadily, and when she speaks, her voice is soft but carries throughout the now silent courtroom. "You already tried to bury me, Ethan. For 15 years. You tried to make me small, silent, invisible. You tried to bury my mother's memory along with her gallery." She pauses, and something fierce flashes in her eyes. But some things refuse to stay buried. Truth is one of them. Justice is another. The officers pull Ethan away, his shouting fading as he's removed from the courtroom. Marcus Blackwell and the rest of the defense team huddle in urgent conversation, their client now facing not just divorce and civil fraud charges, but potential murder charges. Marianne stands alone at her table, trembling slightly now that the moment has passed. In the gallery, she catches sight of several people she recognizes. Former students of her mother's, artists who had exhibited at the Russell Gallery, people who had loved Elizabeth Russell and mourned her loss. An elderly woman in the gallery stands and begins to clap. Slowly, others join her. It's not a celebration. The moment is too heavy with pain and loss for celebration, but rather an acknowledgement. A recognition that truth has been spoken, that a long-buried crime has been brought into the light. Marianne gathers her materials with shaking hands. Outside the courthouse windows, the sky is growing dark. She thinks of her mother's smile in that old photograph, the pride on her face as she stood before her gallery. "The land will be ours again, Mom," she whispers. "I promise you. It will be ours again." The third wall has fallen. But Marianne knows that the most dangerous battles often come when a cornered enemy has nothing left to lose. In the 48 hours following Ethan's arrest, his empire begins to unravel with stunning speed. The carefully constructed image of the visionary architect, the philanthropist, the patron of the arts, all of it crumbles under the weight of evidence and investigation. The Arts Foundation headquarters, a sleek glass building in Lower Manhattan that Ethan had designed himself, becomes a hub of chaotic activity. FBI agents arrive with warrants. Accountants and forensic auditors pore through years of financial records. Employees hurry through hallways with boxes of documents, their faces pale with worry about their own futures. In a conference room on the 10th floor, Marcus Blackwell sits across from his remaining partners, having what is perhaps the most difficult conversation of his legal career. "We need to withdraw from this case," says Sandra Williams, the firm's managing partner. "Every hour we remain associated with Ethan Cole costs us reputation and clients. 3 companies have already put out statements distancing themselves from us." Marcus nods wearily. He looks like he's aged a decade in 2 days. "I understand. I'll file the withdrawal motion this afternoon." "And Marcus," Sandra's voice is gentle but firm, "this will likely be the end of your time with this firm. The partners have voted." In the gallery where it all began, Marianne returns for what she expects to be a brief procedural hearing. But what unfolds is far more dramatic than anyone anticipated. Judge Hoffman enters the courtroom, and the tension is immediately palpable. The defense table, once crowded with expensive attorneys, now holds only Marcus Blackwell, and even he looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Your Honor," Marcus begins, "I am here to formally file a motion to withdraw as counsel for Mr. Cole. Given the revelations of the past week and the criminal charges now pending, my firm believes it would be inappropriate to continue representation in the civil matter." Before the judge can respond, the courtroom doors burst open. A tall woman in a sharp business suit strides in, followed by 2 men carrying briefcases. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption." I am Assistant District Attorney Catherine Morrison. I need to inform the court that additional charges are being filed against Ethan Cole as of this morning. We now have evidence of money laundering, tax fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud affecting multiple institutions. She approaches the bench and submits a thick folder. Additionally, we have 3 more individuals willing to testify about similar schemes carried out by Mr. Cole over the past decade. The scope of his criminal enterprise is significantly larger than initially believed. Judge Hoffman reviews the documents, her expression growing more severe with each page. This is quite extraordinary, Ms. Morrison. How extensive are we talking? Your Honor, our preliminary investigation suggests that Mr. Cole has defrauded various arts institutions, non-profit organizations, and individual clients of approximately $32 million over the past 12 years. We've also uncovered evidence of bribery, kickbacks to building inspectors, and fraudulent billing practices. The gallery erupts in gasps and whispers. Journalists furiously type on their devices. Marianne sits quietly at her table, feeling a mixture of vindication and sorrow. Each revelation confirms what she'd discovered, but it also represents years of her life spent unknowingly complicit in Ethan's schemes simply by being his wife. Additionally, ADA Morrison continues, we've identified 17 young architects and designers whose work was stolen and claimed by Mr. Cole. Many of them have come forward in the past 2 days, and their stories paint a picture of systematic exploitation. Some were paid minimal wages for designs that earned Mr. Cole millions. Others were never paid at all, threatened with lawsuits if they claimed credit for their own work. She pauses, then adds, I should note that Mrs. Cole's evidence and willingness to cooperate has been instrumental in bringing these matters to light. Without her courage, these crimes might have continued indefinitely. Marianne feels tears prick at her eyes but forces them back. This isn't about her courage. This is about justice for her mother, for the young artists, for everyone Ethan harmed in building his false empire. Judge Hoffman turns to Marcus Blackwell. Mr. Blackwell, I'm granting your motion to withdraw. Given the criminal proceedings now underway, I'm also suspending all civil proceedings in this matter until the criminal cases are resolved. Mr. Cole will need to retain new counsel for both matters. Marcus nods gratefully and begins gathering his materials. As he passes Marianne's table, he pauses briefly. Mrs. Cole, he says quietly, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I believed my client. I should have looked deeper. Marianne nods, accepting the apology without endorsing it. Marcus Blackwell made choices throughout this case, and those choices have consequences. Later that afternoon, in a holding cell at the Manhattan Detention Complex, Ethan Cole sits on a concrete bench, staring at the wall. The man who once commanded million-dollar projects and attended galas with celebrities now wears an orange jumpsuit and waits to be processed like any common criminal. His court-appointed attorney, a harried public defender named Robert Chong, sits across from him reviewing the charges. Mr. Cole, I need you to understand the severity of your situation. The charges against you, if proven, carry sentences that could total 60 years or more. The evidence the prosecution has is extensive. Ethan laughs bitterly. Evidence my wife stole from me. Can't we argue illegal search and seizure? Mr. Cole, she was your wife, living in your shared home. What she found wasn't obtained through illegal search. And frankly, even if there were some technicality we could exploit, the fact that multiple witnesses are now corroborating the evidence makes that strategy moot. Those witnesses are liars. Artists who couldn't make it on their own, trying to piggyback on my success. Mr. Cole. Robert's voice is sharp, cutting through his client's denial. I need you to understand something. Your wife documented everything. She has emails, financial records, audio recordings, testimony from accomplices. The prosecution's case is airtight. Your only realistic option is to negotiate a plea deal. The words seem to finally penetrate Ethan's armor of denial. His face goes pale. A plea deal. You mean admit to crimes I didn't commit? Robert closes his folder and looks at his client with a mixture of pity and frustration. Mr. Cole, every criminal defendant says they didn't commit the crimes they're charged with. But in your case, the evidence is overwhelming. You're not going to walk away from this. The only question is whether you spend 20 years in prison or 50. Meanwhile, at the Arts Foundation building, the board of directors convenes an emergency meeting. The 12 board members, all prominent figures in New York's art and business worlds, sit around a massive conference table, their faces reflecting varying degrees of anger, fear, and calculation. Richard Pemberton, the board chairman and longtime friend of Ethan's, calls the meeting to order. Ladies and gentlemen, we face an unprecedented crisis. Our founder and president is facing serious criminal charges. Our reputation is in tatters. Donors are suspending contributions. We need to make decisive moves to protect this institution. Protect the institution. Maria Santos, one of the younger board members, speaks up. Richard, the institution has been a front for criminal activity. Maybe we need to accept that it needs to be completely restructured, not protected. I won't have this foundation that I helped build destroyed because of one man's poor judgment, Richard responds sharply. But even as he speaks, federal agents are gathering evidence that will prove the rot goes far deeper than one man. The board itself has been complicit, perhaps not in the arson or the fraud, but in willful blindness, in asking no questions about how Ethan could afford such lavish projects on a non-profit's budget. The empire is fracturing, cracking along fault lines that were always there but hidden beneath a glossy veneer of success and prestige. And at the center of it all, the quiet woman everyone had dismissed is the one holding the hammer. 3 weeks after Ethan's arrest, Marianne Cole walks through the front doors of the Arts Foundation headquarters for the first time as something other than Mrs. Cole, the architect's wife. Today, she arrives with purpose, carrying a leather portfolio that contains evidence of corruption that reaches into the very heart of the foundation's board. The receptionist looks up in surprise. Mrs. Cole, I didn't know you had an appointment. I don't need one, Marianne says calmly. Please inform the board that I'm here and that they'll want to see what I have to show them. 15 minutes later, she's shown into the boardroom where an emergency session is already underway. The 12 board members look up in surprise as she enters, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Richard Pemberton, the board chairman, stands. Mrs. Cole, this is a closed board meeting. Whatever business you have can be scheduled through proper channels. Sit down, Richard, Marianne says, her voice quiet but commanding. She's no longer the timid wife who attended foundation galas on Ethan's arm. I'm here to discuss your resignation and the resignations of at least 6 other board members. You'll want to hear what I have to say. Richard's face flushes red. How dare you come in here and... Richard. Maria Santos interrupts. Let her speak. Marianne sets her portfolio on the conference table and opens it. For the past 2 months, while building my case against my husband, I've also been investigating the foundation itself. What I found is that Ethan's crimes weren't committed in isolation. They required cooperation, or at the very least, deliberate ignorance from this board. She begins laying out documents on the table. These are financial records showing irregular payments to board members. Richard, you received consulting fees totaling $300,000 over the past 5 years. Consulting fees for what, exactly? You're the chairman of a non-profit board. That's supposed to be a volunteer position. Richard's face pales. Those were legitimate payments for strategic planning. Strategic planning that involved approving inflated construction budgets on projects where contractors kicked money back to Ethan's private accounts. Marianne's voice is sharp now. Strategic planning that included approving land purchases at above market rates from sellers who turned out to be Ethan's shell companies. She turns to another board member, Gerald Hutchins, a real estate developer. Gerald, you voted to approve the purchase of the Riverside property for $6 million. $3 million above its appraised value. That property was owned by Hudson Holdings, a company you have a 40% stake in. You failed to disclose this conflict of interest. Gerald shifts uncomfortably. That was an oversight in disclosure, not fraud. An oversight that netted you over $1 million in personal profit from a nonprofit's funds. I think the IRS might view that differently. One by one, Marianne goes through the board members, laying out evidence of conflicts of interest, undisclosed payments, approval of questionable expenditures, and willful blindness to obvious irregularities in the foundation's finances. For years, she says, addressing the entire board, you've benefited from Ethan's schemes. Maybe you didn't know exactly what he was doing, but you didn't ask questions because asking questions might have ended the gravy train. You approved budgets without oversight. You rubber-stamped decisions without due diligence. You took payments and perks and looked the other way. This is slander, Richard blusters, but his voice lacks conviction. No, Richard, this is documentation. And I've already provided copies to the district attorney's office, the IRS, and the New York Attorney General. They're very interested in examining the foundation's practices and the board's governance. The room falls silent. Several board members look genuinely shocked. They truly hadn't known the extent of what was happening. But others, like Richard and Gerald, look trapped. Maria Santos speaks up. Mrs. Cole, what is it you want? Marianne meets her gaze steadily. I want this foundation to actually serve its stated mission, supporting artists and preserving art. I want the corrupt board members gone. And I want the foundation restructured to prevent this from ever happening again. And if we refuse, Richard asked, then I'll release these documents to every major media outlet in New York. Your reputations will be destroyed, and the foundation will likely be dissolved entirely by the state. Is that what you want? Because I'm perfectly willing to let this entire corrupt enterprise burn to the ground if that's what it takes. The threat hangs in the air. Finally, Robert Chen, one of the older board members who had served since the foundation's inception, speaks. She's right. We've failed in our fiduciary duty. Some of us out of greed, others out of negligence, but we've all failed. I'll submit my resignation effective immediately. Robert, don't be hasty, Richard begins. Hasty. Robert's voice is sharp. Richard, federal agents have been through this building for 3 weeks. The foundation's name is mud. Our only chance at survival is complete transparency and restructuring. Mrs. Cole is offering us a way to do that with some dignity intact. I suggest we take it. Over the next hour, the board debates and argues. Some members, their involvement minimal and their conscience clear, offer to stay and help with restructuring. Others, like Richard and Gerald, see the writing on the wall and grudgingly agree to resign. By the end of the meeting, 6 board members have submitted resignations. The remaining 6 vote to establish an independent review committee to examine all of the foundation's finances and practices over the past decade. They also vote, with Maria Santos making the motion, to appoint Marianne Cole as interim executive director with emergency powers to stabilize the organization. Richard, in his final moments as chairman, looks at Marianne with something like bewilderment. I knew you for 15 years. Quiet little Marianne who smiled at galas and never said much. How did we all miss what you were capable of? Marianne's smile is sad. You didn't miss it, Richard. You just never looked. None of you ever really looked at me at all. I was just the famous architect's wife. Decorative. Irrelevant. She gathers her documents, preparing to leave. That was your first mistake. The second was assuming that quiet meant weak. My mother taught me that you don't need to be loud to be strong. You just need to be certain of your truth and willing to stand by it. As she walks out of the boardroom, now the foundation's acting director, Marianne allows herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The board has fallen. The corrupt elements have been purged. Now comes the harder work, rebuilding something honest from the ruins of Ethan's empire. In his cell, when Ethan hears the news of Marianne's appointment, he laughs bitterly. His lawyer, visiting to discuss plea bargains, asks what's funny. My wife, Ethan says, shaking his head. I spent 15 years building this empire, and she's dismantling it piece by piece. She's taking everything I created and claiming it as her own. With respect, Mr. Cole, his lawyer says, she's not claiming your empire. She's revealing that it was never really yours to begin with. You built it with stolen money, stolen designs, and stolen lives. She's not taking anything from you. She's returning things to their rightful owners. The words hit Ethan harder than any prison bars could. For the first time, he begins to understand that he hasn't just lost his freedom and his wealth. He's lost the narrative. History won't remember him as a great architect. It will remember him as the criminal who exploited artists and murdered an old woman for her land. And it will remember Marianne as the one who brought him down. It's past midnight when Marianne enters the Foundation's main office building with a security guard escort. As interim director, she now has access to every part of the facility, including areas that were previously Ethan's exclusive domain. You sure you want to do this tonight, Miss Cole? The guard, an older man named Thomas, asks with concern. Building's pretty empty this time of night. Kinda creepy. Marianne nods. I need to go through Ethan's private office before the federal auditors seal it tomorrow. There might be something they've missed. Ethan's office is on the top floor, a massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It's been stripped of personal items by federal agents, but the furniture remains, a testament to Ethan's expensive taste. Everything is designer, custom-made, absurdly luxurious for a non-profit organization. Marianne begins methodically searching. She goes through the desk drawers that the FBI has already examined, checks behind picture frames, examines the bookshelf. She's not sure what she's looking for, but she knows her husband. He kept secrets within secrets. There's something here, she's certain of it. She's about to give up when her hand brushes against an anomaly in the bookshelf, a section that doesn't quite sit flush with the wall. She pushes, and a panel swings open, revealing a small safe built into the wall behind the books. Thomas, who's been waiting by the door, walks over. Well, I'll be damned. 15 years I've worked here. Never knew that was there. The safe requires a code. Marianne tries several combinations. Ethan's birthday, their anniversary, the founding date of the foundation. Nothing works. Then, on impulse, she tries her mother's birthday. The safe clicks open. Inside is a single item, a leather-bound journal with red binding worn from use. What is it? Thomas asks. Marianne opens the journal, her hands trembling. The first page is dated 12 years ago, just weeks before the Russell Gallery fire. She recognizes Ethan's handwriting immediately. It's a record, she whispers. He documented everything. She begins to read, and with each page, her horror grows. The journal is comprehensive, a chronicle of crimes spanning years. Ethan had recorded it all with the meticulous detail of a project manager tracking a construction timeline. The entry about her mother's gallery is clinical, devoid of remorse. November 14th. Russell property issue resolved. VC executed plan flawlessly. Electrical origin will prevent investigation. Insurance payout calculated to ensure insufficient funds for rebuild. Estimated acquisition timeline: 4 to 6 months. Projected development profit: $12 million. There are entries about fraudulent billing, about paying off building inspectors, about stealing designs from young architects. Each crime documented, rationalized, treated as simply another business transaction. But there are also entries about a partner, someone Ethan referred to only as E. This person wasn't just an accomplice. They were an active participant in planning many of the schemes. Marianne flips through the pages, trying to piece together the identity from the clues Ethan had left. And then she finds it. An entry from 8 years ago. E suggests expanding offshore structure. His connections in the Caymans are proving invaluable. Without his accounting expertise, none of this would be sustainable at current scale. Split remains 70 to 30, though he continues to push for equal partnership. Must keep him satisfied but subordinate. Elias Brennan. Ethan's longtime accountant and the Foundation's CFO. The man who still works in this building, who has access to all the financial systems, who has been quietly present throughout the investigation, claiming ignorance and cooperating with authorities. Marianne's blood runs cold. Elias isn't a witness. He's a co-conspirator. And he's still here, still free, probably destroying evidence and preparing his own escape. Thomas, she says urgently, I need you to call Detective Morrison at the DA's office right now. Tell her it's an emergency. But before Thomas can pull out his phone, the office lights suddenly go out. Emergency lighting casts the room in an eerie red glow. Power failure. Thomas asks, but his voice is uncertain. Marianne clutches the red diary to her chest. No. Someone's here. A voice comes from the doorway, cultured and cold. Very perceptive, Marianne. Elias Brennan steps into the office. He's always been an unremarkable man. Average height, average build, the kind of person who blends into backgrounds at meetings. But now, backlit by the emergency lights, he looks dangerous. You should have left well enough alone, he says, and there's genuine regret in his voice. This didn't have to involve you. You could have taken a divorce settlement and walked away wealthy. But you had to play detective. You had to bring everything down. Elias, Marianne says, trying to keep her voice steady. The building is secure. There are cameras everywhere. You can't. Can't what? Cameras are disabled. Security systems too. I've been planning this contingency since Ethan's arrest. Did you really think I'd just sit and wait to be caught? Thomas moves to position himself between Marianne and Elias, but Elias pulls out a gun. Small, sleek, utterly terrifying in its casual presence. Don't be a hero, Thomas. You've got grandchildren. Think about them. Thomas freezes. Here's how this is going to work, Elias says. His voice still calm, almost conversational. Marianne, you're going to give me that diary. Then you and Thomas are going to stay in this office for exactly 1 hour while I leave the building and the country. After I'm safely away, the security systems will restore, and you can tell whatever story you want. Or, his voice hardens, you can refuse, and this ends very differently. Marianne's mind races. The diary is the final piece of evidence, the proof that could put both Ethan and Elias away for life. But it's not worth dying for. She starts to extend the diary toward him. Marianne, don't. Thomas begins, but Elias swings the gun toward him. That's when Marianne makes her move. Her phone, she realizes, has been recording since the moment Elias started talking. She'd turned on the voice recorder when she first entered the office, a habit she'd developed during her investigation. And the recording is uploading to cloud storage in real time. Elias, she says, her voice stronger now, before I give this to you, I need to know something. Why document everything? Why keep this diary at all? Elias laughs bitterly. Insurance. Ethan was brilliant but unstable. I needed leverage in case he ever tried to cut me out or throw me under the bus. Turns out I was smart to do that. He tried both eventually. And my mother. Did you know about that? Planned it with him. The Russell property was key to the whole development strategy. Your mother was a sweet woman, Marianne, but she was an obstacle. In business, you remove obstacles. He's confessing. He's actually confessing, probably assuming it doesn't matter because Marianne won't leave this room alive, or at least not with any proof. One more question, Marianne says. The other projects. How many were there? Besides the Russell Gallery. Oh, probably 8 or 9 major frauds. Small stuff we did dozens. Ethan kept trying to pull back, worried we'd get caught. But the money was too good. And honestly, Elias smiles, and it's chilling. It was fun. Outsmarting everyone. Building an empire that everyone praised while never seeing what it really was. Fun, Marianne repeats quietly. My mother died, and you thought it was fun. Your mother was collateral damage in a larger game. If it helps, I voted against that particular plan. Too risky, I said. But Ethan insisted. He steps forward, extending his free hand. The diary, Marianne. Now. But suddenly the emergency lights snap back on, followed immediately by the main lights. The door bursts open, and officers in tactical gear pour into the room. Freeze! Drop the weapon! Elias spins toward them, and for a moment, it seems like he might try to shoot his way out. But then his shoulders sag, and he carefully places the gun on the floor. Detective Catherine Morrison enters, her own weapon drawn. Elias Brennan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, among other charges. As officers secure Elias, Thomas turns to Marianne in confusion. How did they? Marianne holds up her phone, still recording. I called Detective Morrison before we came up here. Told her I thought there might be evidence in Ethan's office, and that Elias might try to stop me from finding it. She had a team standing by. It's not entirely true. She'd hoped to avoid this confrontation, but it sounds better than admitting she'd nearly walked into a trap. What is true is that her phone has captured Elias's entire confession. Detective Morrison approaches and carefully takes the red diary. Mrs. Cole, this is exactly what we needed. With this and the recording, both Cole and Brennan are looking at life sentences. As Elias is led away in handcuffs, he looks at Marianne one last time. You've destroyed something beautiful, you know. An empire. A legacy. No, Marianne says quietly. I've destroyed a criminal enterprise built on lies and death. There's nothing beautiful about that. Later, sitting in an interview room at the precinct, giving her statement, Marianne feels the full weight of the evening crash over her. She'd been so close to disaster. If Elias had been slightly quicker, slightly more violent, if the police had been delayed even by minutes. But she hadn't failed. She'd survived. More than that, she'd won. The red diary, now in evidence lockup, contains every crime, every scheme, every victim. It's Ethan's ego made manifest. He couldn't resist documenting his cleverness, even knowing it might someday be his downfall. As dawn breaks over New York City, Marianne leaves the police station. She's exhausted, traumatized, but alive. The game is almost over. All that remains is the rebuilding. The arrest of Elias Brennan sends shockwaves through what remains of Ethan Cole's organization. The red diary, combined with Elias's recorded confession, provides prosecutors with an overwhelming case. But in the days following the dramatic confrontation in the Foundation office, investigators discover that the conspiracy went even deeper than anyone had imagined. Marianne, now settling into her role as interim director of the Arts Foundation, receives a call from Detective Morrison 3 days after Elias's arrest. Mrs. Cole, we need you to come down to the office. We've found something in the diary that requires your input. When Marianne arrives, she's shown into a conference room where Morrison and 2 other investigators have the diary's contents spread across a large table, photographed and organized chronologically. We've been going through Ethan's entries systematically, Morrison explains. And we've identified at least 12 other individuals who were involved in various aspects of the criminal enterprise. Some were knowing participants, others were unknowingly used as pawns. But there's one person who concerns us most. She points to several entries scattered throughout the diary. Ethan references someone he calls the facilitator. This person appears to have connections to city officials, building inspectors, and even judges. They're the one who made a lot of the corruption possible, smoothing permits, suppressing investigations, ensuring that Ethan's projects never faced serious scrutiny. Marianne reads the entries, her stomach churning. Do you know who it is? We have a theory, Morrison says carefully. But we need more evidence before we can move. And frankly, if we're right, this person has enough power and connections to make building a case very difficult. She pauses, then continues. Mrs. Cole, we need your help. Some of these diary entries mention meetings you attended. Galas, foundation events, dinner parties. We need you to look at photographs from these events and see if you can identify patterns. Who was Ethan consistently meeting with? Who did he go out of his way to speak with privately? Over the next several hours, Marianne reviews dozens of photographs. Events she'd attended as the dutiful wife, smiling for cameras while having no idea of the criminal dealings happening around her. And gradually a pattern emerges. There's one person who appears in photos from multiple events, always in deep conversation with Ethan, always positioned away from the main crowds. Raymond Holt, a deputy commissioner in the city's Department of Buildings, a position that gave him oversight of construction permits and building inspections throughout New York. Raymond Holt, Marianne says quietly. He was always very friendly to Ethan. I remember thinking it was odd how often he showed up at foundation events, considering he wasn't particularly interested in art. Morrison nods grimly. We've been investigating Commissioner Holt for the past 6 months on unrelated corruption charges. But we've never had enough evidence to move forward. If he's the facilitator mentioned in the diary, and if we can prove it, we can bring down not just Ethan's empire but an entire network of municipal corruption. What do you need from me? Do you remember any specific conversations? Any details that might help us establish the connection? Marianne closes her eyes, thinking back. And suddenly a memory surfaces. There was a gala about 2 years ago. I went to get some air on the terrace, and I overheard Ethan and someone talking about the Riverside inspection problem. I didn't see who Ethan was talking to, but I remember him saying something like, "I need this handled at the source, Ray. Can't have inspectors nosing around the foundation work." She opens her eyes. I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed it was legitimate construction talk. But Riverside. That was one of the projects with fraudulent billing, wasn't it? Yes, Morrison confirms. And according to records, that project should have failed multiple building inspections. But somehow every inspection came back clean. If Holt was involved in suppressing those reports. You have him, Marianne says. But the investigation into Raymond Holt proves more complicated than anyone anticipated. Holt is politically connected, wealthy, and has an army of lawyers. When investigators approach him with questions, he immediately lawyers up and stops cooperating. Meanwhile, Elias Brennan, facing life in prison and with nothing left to lose, offers to cooperate fully with investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. In a series of recorded interviews, he provides detailed accounts of how the corruption network functioned. Raymond Holt was the keystone, Elias explains to prosecutors. Nothing happened without his approval and facilitation. When we needed a permit rushed through, Holt handled it. When an inspection looked like it might uncover problems, Holt ensured the inspector was reassigned or the report was buried. In return, Holt received monthly payments into an offshore account, payments that totaled over $3 million across 8 years. But testimony from a co-conspirator, even one cooperating with authorities, isn't enough to bring down someone like Holt. They need hard evidence. That evidence comes from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, the board member who had supported Marianne during the board confrontation, approaches her one afternoon with a troubled expression. "Marianne, I need to show you something. It's been bothering me since we started going through the foundation's old files." She produces a box of old expense reports and receipts. These are from Ethan's entertainment budget. Look at the frequency of charges to a particular restaurant. Marianne examines the reports. La Maison Blanche, an exclusive French restaurant in Midtown. Ethan had apparently dined there twice a month for years, always billing it to the foundation as donor relations meals. So he liked expensive restaurants, Marianne says. That's not illegal, just inappropriate for a non-profit. Look at the dates, Maria insists. Cross-reference them with entries in that diary the police are analyzing. Marianne does, and her eyes widen. Nearly every meeting with the facilitator mentioned in the diary corresponds to a dinner charge at La Maison Blanche. If we could get the restaurant's records, Maria says, see who Ethan was dining with on those dates. Within days, armed with a subpoena, investigators obtain La Maison Blanche's reservation records. And there it is. Reservation after reservation in Ethan Cole's name with Raymond Holt listed as his guest. Dozens of dinners, spanning years, billed to the Arts Foundation as legitimate business expenses. But Holt's lawyers argue these were legitimate meetings between a non-profit director and a city official. Nothing criminal about dinner meetings. The break comes from the restaurant itself. The owner, Georges Martineau, reads about the investigation in the newspapers and reaches out to authorities with information that changes everything. Monsieur Cole, he always requested the private room, Georges tells investigators in his accented English. And he was very specific. No staff in the room during the meal except to serve courses. He would slip me an extra $100 to ensure privacy. Did you ever overhear their conversations? Detective Morrison asks. Georges hesitates, then nods. The walls, they are not so thick as Monsieur Cole believed. I sometimes heard things while in the wine cellar, which shares a wall with the private room. Talk of money, of permits, of taking care of problems. At the time, I thought perhaps they were discussing legitimate business. But after reading about the charges, he provides a statement, and suddenly the pattern becomes clear. Private dinners, demands for absolute privacy, conversations about payments and permits. The circumstantial evidence is building into something damning. The final piece falls into place when forensic accountants trace the offshore payments. Using the account information Elias provided, they track transfers from Ethan's shell companies to an account in the Caymans. That account, opened 10 years ago, belongs to a corporation called North Star Consulting. North Star Consulting's sole owner, Raymond Holt's wife, Patricia. It's a classic corruption scheme. Payments made to a spouse's company to create a layer of separation. But it's not enough separation. The money trail is clear. Ethan's illegal profits flowing to Holt's family in exchange for official favors. When confronted with this evidence, Holt's lawyers try to argue that his wife's business dealings were independent, that he had no knowledge of who her clients were. But when investigators dig deeper, they discover that North Star Consulting has no employees, no office, and has never provided any actual consulting services to anyone. It's a shell company, existing solely to receive payments. Raymond Holt is arrested on a Wednesday morning, led out of City Hall in handcuffs as cameras flash and reporters shout questions. The image, a powerful city official in handcuffs, dominates the news cycle for days. Marianne watches the coverage from her new office at the foundation. She feels no joy in seeing another person's downfall, but there is grim satisfaction in seeing justice served. That evening, she visits Ethan in jail. It's the first time she's seen him since his arrest, and she's surprised by how much he's changed. The arrogance is gone, replaced by a hollow shell of the man who once commanded rooms with his presence. "You got Raymond too," he says without preamble. "I have to admit I'm impressed. I never thought you had this in you." "You never thought I had a lot of things in me," Marianne responds. "That was your mistake." "Was it worth it?" Ethan asked. "Destroying everything I built. Destroying me." Marianne is quiet for a long moment. "You destroyed yourself, Ethan. I just made sure everyone could see it. And what you built wasn't worth preserving. It was built on lies and crime and my mother's death." She stands to leave, but Ethan speaks again. "For what it's worth, I didn't want your mother to die. The fire was only supposed to destroy the building. Her heart attack. That wasn't part of the plan. That doesn't make it better, Ethan. That makes it worse. You destroyed her life's work so casually, so thoughtlessly, that you didn't even consider it might kill her. She was a real person with real feelings, not just an obstacle to your profit margin." As she walks out of the visiting room, Marianne realizes this will likely be the last time she sees her ex-husband. The man she once loved or thought she loved no longer exists, if he ever did. In his place is a criminal facing the consequences of his choices. Outside the prison, Detective Morrison is waiting. "Mrs. Cole, I wanted to thank you personally. Without your courage in coming forward, none of this would have been possible." Ethan, Elias, Holt, and 6 other conspirators, all facing serious prison time. "You've dismantled an entire corruption network." Marianne shakes her head. "I just wanted justice for my mother. Everything else. It was just following the truth wherever it led." "Well, the truth led to one of the biggest corruption cases in city history. You should be proud." As Marianne drives home through the city streets, She thinks about pride. She's not sure that's what she feels. Relief, perhaps. A sense of completion. Justice served. But pride. That will come later if it comes at all. For now, she has a foundation to rebuild and a mother's legacy to honor. The hunt is over. The guilty have been caught. Now comes the harder work of healing and rebuilding. 6 months pass like a healing wound. Painful, gradual, but marked by steady progress. Ethan Cole receives a sentence of 35 years for fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit arson, and manslaughter in connection with Elizabeth Russell's death. Elias Brennan, in exchange for his cooperation, receives 20 years. Raymond Holt gets 28 years and is immediately disbarred from ever serving in public office again. 7 other conspirators receive sentences ranging from probation to 15 years, depending on their level of involvement and willingness to cooperate with investigators. But for Marianne, the real work has nothing to do with punishment and everything to do with rebuilding. The Arts Foundation, under her leadership, has been completely restructured. The old model, a traditional non-profit with a powerful executive and rubber stamp board, has been replaced with something revolutionary. An arts cooperative owned and operated by the artists themselves. It's a cool spring morning when Marianne stands before a gathered crowd at the Foundation's newly renovated headquarters. The building itself has been transformed. The ostentatious displays of wealth that characterized Ethan's regime have been removed. In their place are gallery spaces showcasing work by emerging artists, studios where young creators can work affordably, and meeting rooms available to arts organizations throughout the city. Thank you all for coming today, Marianne begins, addressing the crowd of artists, community members, and press gathered for the Foundation's relaunch. 6 months ago, this organization was exposed as a criminal enterprise masquerading as a non-profit. Today, we're starting fresh with a simple but powerful mission: to actually support artists rather than exploit them. She explains the new structure. Artists who join the cooperative become stakeholders with voting rights on how funds are distributed, which projects are supported, and how the foundation operates. All financial records are transparent and publicly available. No single person can control the organization the way Ethan once did. We've also established the Elizabeth Russell Memorial Fund, Marianne continues, her voice catching slightly. This fund will provide grants specifically to artists from underrepresented communities and to small galleries and art spaces that are struggling to survive. My mother believed that art should be accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. This fund honors that belief. The crowd applauds, and Marianne sees tears in the eyes of several people who knew her mother. Among the crowd are familiar faces. The young architects whose work Ethan stole have become vocal advocates for artists' rights and intellectual property protection. Maria Santos now serves as the cooperative's elected board chair. Thomas, the security guard who stood with Marianne during the confrontation with Elias, has been promoted to head of security and facilities. But there's one more thing Marianne needs to do to truly complete her mother's legacy. The following week, she drives out to Brooklyn, to the lot where the Russell Gallery once stood. The land, seized as proceeds of crime during Ethan's prosecution, has been tied up in legal proceedings. But with the criminal cases concluded, the city has ruled that the land should be returned to the Russell family, to Marianne. She stands at the edge of the lot, now overgrown with weeds, and remembers the gallery as it was. The warm light from the windows on opening nights. Her mother's proud smile as she welcomed visitors. The sense of community and creativity that had filled the space. Ms. Cole. A voice interrupts her reverie. It's Andrew Chen, a young architect who had been one of Ethan's victims. I hope I'm not intruding. I heard you'd be here today. Not at all, Marianne says. What brings you here? I wanted to talk to you about a project. Several of us, architects and designers whose work your ex-husband stole, we've been collaborating on something. A proposal for this site. He unrolls architectural plans on the hood of his car. We want to design a new community art center for you, pro bono. A tribute to your mother and everything she stood for. It would have gallery space, studios, classrooms, performance areas. everything a thriving arts community needs. Marianne looks at the plans, and tears begin to flow. The design is beautiful, modern but warm, functional but inspiring. It's everything her mother would have loved. We want to call it the Russell Center for Community Arts, Andrew continues. And we want you to know that this is our real work, our true vision. Not the designs Ethan stole and claimed as his own. This is what we're capable of when we're allowed to create freely. It's perfect, Marianne manages to say through her tears. It's absolutely perfect. Over the following months, the Russell Center begins to take shape. Funding comes from the restitution paid by Ethan's estate, from community donations, and from grants provided by the Reformed Arts Foundation. Construction is handled by contractors who agree to transparent pricing and fair labor practices, a deliberate rejection of everything Ethan's projects represented. Marianne visits the site every week, watching as the building rises from the ground. Each beam placed, each wall erected, feels like a reclamation, not just of land, but of dignity, purpose, and her mother's stolen legacy. On one such visit, she's approached by an elderly woman she doesn't immediately recognize. The woman's face is lined with age, but her eyes are bright with emotion. "You don't remember me, do you?" the woman says gently. "I'm Patricia Vance. I was one of your mother's first students, back when she was teaching art classes in her tiny studio before the gallery." Marianne's face lights up with recognition. "Mrs. Vance, of course. You painted landscapes. Mother always said you had an extraordinary sense of light and shadow." Patricia smiles, tears gathering in her eyes. "Your mother changed my life. I was a housewife who'd never picked up a brush until I was 45 years old. She convinced me I had talent, that it was never too late to become an artist. Because of her, I've spent the last 30 years painting. I've even sold a few pieces." She reaches into her bag and pulls out a small canvas. "I painted this for you. For the new center." The painting shows the Russell Gallery as it was, glowing warmly in the evening light, with Elizabeth Russell visible through the window, arranging an exhibit. "It's beautiful and heartbreaking and perfect." "Thank you," Marianne whispers, clutching the painting. "This will hang in the center's main entrance. Everyone who comes through those doors will see what my mother built, what she meant to people like you." As Patricia leaves, Marianne realizes that this is what victory truly looks like. Not the courtroom triumphs, not the arrests and convictions, but this, the restoration of her mother's true legacy, the continuation of her work, the honoring of what she stood for. The Russell Center for Community Arts opens on a bright October morning, exactly 13 years after the fire that destroyed the original gallery. The timing is not coincidental. The dedication ceremony is attended by hundreds, artists her mother had taught or inspired, community members who had loved the original gallery, young creators who will benefit from the new space, and representatives from arts organizations throughout the city. Marianne stands at the podium, looking out at the crowd and at the beautiful building behind her, a building that represents everything her mother believed in, designed and built with integrity and honesty. "My mother used to say that art is how we speak truth when words aren't enough," Marianne begins. "For too long, that truth was buried under lies, manipulation, and greed. Today we reclaim it." She pauses, her voice strengthening. "This center isn't just a building. It's a promise that art will be protected, that artists will be honored, that creativity will be nurtured rather than exploited. It's a promise that truth, no matter how long buried, will eventually rise." She looks up at the building's facade, where Russell Center for Community Arts is carved in elegant letters. Below it, a smaller plaque reads, "Founded by Elizabeth Russell, restored by the community she served." "Mom," Marianne whispers, so quietly that only those in the front row can hear, "we brought it back. We brought you back." As the crowd applauds and the center's doors officially open for the first time, Marianne allows herself to feel something she hasn't felt in years: peace. The journey from that first day in court to this moment has been exhausting, frightening, and often painful. But standing here now, watching artists stream into a space built on honesty and dedicated to her mother's memory, she knows it was worth every moment. Later that evening, after the crowds have dispersed and the celebration has ended, Marianne returns to the center alone. She walks through the empty galleries, her footsteps echoing in the spacious rooms. She stops in front of Patricia Vance's painting, now mounted prominently in the entrance hall. Her phone buzzes with a text from Detective Morrison. Saw the coverage of the opening. Your mother would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. You did it. Marianne smiles and types back. We all did it. Justice is never just one person's work. She pulls out the old photograph of her mother that she's carried with her throughout this entire journey. Elizabeth Russell smiles back at her from that opening day so many years ago, pride and hope shining in her eyes. I kept my promise, Mom, Marianne says quietly to the photograph. Your dream didn't die in that fire. It just had to wait a little while to be reborn. She thinks about Ethan sitting in his prison cell, about Elias and Raymond Holt and all the others who thought they could build empires on lies and exploitation, about the young architects who now create under their own names, about the foundation that now actually serves artists instead of exploiting them. And she thinks about herself, the silent wife who found her voice, the frightened woman who discovered her strength, the grieving daughter who honored her mother's legacy in the most profound way possible. She's no longer Marianne Cole. She's Marianne Russell, a name she wears with pride. The woman she is now, director of the Arts Foundation, creator of the Russell Center, advocate for justice, would be unrecognizable to the person she was 2 years ago. But her mother would recognize her. Her mother would see in her the same fierce commitment to truth, the same unwillingness to accept injustice, the same quiet strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard. As Marianne locks the center's doors and walks out into the cool evening air, she allows herself one final moment of reflection. The battle is over. The empire has fallen. The truth has been told. Justice, imperfect but real, has been served. Tomorrow, the real work begins. Running the foundation, expanding the center's programs, ensuring that what happened to her mother can never happen to anyone else. There will be challenges ahead, obstacles to overcome, new battles to fight. But tonight, she simply walks home through the Brooklyn streets, past the neighborhood her mother loved, under the same stars that witnessed both the fire that destroyed the gallery and the opening of the center that rose from its ashes. She is no longer silent. She is no longer powerless. She is no longer afraid. She is free.